Creeping to Power, Schleichend an die Macht. That is the title of a new book by political scientist Andreas Audretsch and historian Claudia Gatzka. It is available in July for €14.90 and the publishing house is Dietz Verlag. As the title already suggests, this is about the oppositions being creeps, and it is directed at leftists who are in power positions. These are people that are totally aware that they control the media, the churches, the NGOs, and the book portrays how the general narrative of the left is to be adapted for the current corona crisis. The blurb identifies the creeps that seek power as the AfD, but also as the Italian former Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini and Hungarian's Prime Minister Viktor Orban. And throughout the book, and also in an interview that I will talk you through in a moment, they use the words right-wing extremists, populists, right-wing radical, and so on, all interchangeably. And I believe this is strategic and serves the purpose of avoiding legal action. So if the assumptions they make about other people and the accusations are not true, they can just shift the target all the time, and people are unable to defend themselves. No group is addressed long enough to incentivize these people to fight back through the courts. So the moving target is a strategy that had been used in Germany and across Europe for the last years perpetually. And this is what the book does as well. It just lumps everybody together, and supposedly the AfD is responsible for what happens in Italy, and Hungary is just as authoritarian and Nazi and fascist and anti-good as Donald Trump. So this is the overall line, and everything is radical. Of course, I have not read the book, and I will not, but I go through an interview they gave to ZEIT, and I believe the entire reason for the book is that these people need an excuse to meet up with media types and appear on their shows and give interviews, so they can spread their theses about how bad and evil everybody outside of their group is. And so they are now talking about, of course, the coronavirus protests. There are the restrictions, and people are rebelling against what they perceive as undue restrictions. Certainly, some of the restrictions are not appropriate. There's always something that's over the top. I've seen a lot of examples. I just won't go with you through that because you, in your own life, have seen a lot of those things. So this is what the power elites are concerned about, and this is what they need to weaponize against any potential opposition, no matter who it is, from Donald Trump to Orban to Matteo Salvini and so forth. And so the fear Andreas Audretsch expresses is that the coronavirus protests, the anti-restriction protests, could win the interpretation high ground for the political right. That expression, interpretation high ground, does not exist in English-speaking countries because the English are an open-minded people who are debating. Likewise, this is the case for Jews, for example. And they would just assume they are exchanging arguments and logic and arrive at a conclusion when they have heard all sides, right? However, in German literature, we have a lot of discussions about this Deutungshoheit, about who holds it now, who shouldn't hold it, how can you assail it? For example, the Deutungshoheit about religion, about the churches, was one that had long been discussed publicly. And now they fear, of course, losing the Deutungshoheit. In a democratic society, that kind of the loudest voice should just interpret all information for everybody, and everybody should just join in the lockstep, is not entertained. But this is a word we are used to. This is a dictionary word, Deutungshoheit. Historian Claudia Gatzka adds that she sees the protests as right-wing, but presenting itself falsely as independent. By and large, I think the groups are more to the conservative side and more to the right and to the libertarian side than to the staunch left. However, her logic is quite interesting, and I think it's a tell-all of her entire approach and also of what she's going to say later in the interview and probably also throughout the book. and that is that she has a very loopy, fabricated logic, and she is working with associations. This is something you have seen on the political left many times, but as an academic, you actually expect more of people, particularly of a historian. So she says that you can tell that these groups are right-wing because in Italy they are also right-wing. This is a very unclean approach, right? I mean, if you have a historian and she says, well, in the Middle Ages there was a cult in Spain that was about, I don't know, singing to the moon or whatever, and then there is a different cult mentioned in China, and because it's about the same year, it's probably the same cult. This is a very loopy logic. You cannot associate things with very few commonalities, like in this case it would be the year in the Middle Ages, and likewise, okay, you have protests here in Italy and you have protests here in Germany, and so you cannot tell how the protests in Germany look like by looking at the protests in Italy. I still say yes, most of the protesters in Germany would, in my opinion, be right-wing as well. But the logic she uses is a tell-all of how loopy she is. They soon arrive at a conundrum, a strategic conundrum the left cannot solve possibly because they hold the power, they totally know that they hold the power, and still they present themselves as fighting for the little guy against the powerful. And so they usually claim they are for freedom, and they allow you a lot of things that are actually harmful to yourself, like you can become as fat as you want, you can take as many drugs as you like. We welcome that, and if you want to see a prostitute, do so. So this is their image. May even have that of themselves, but now I'm talking about strategists, people who are clear-eyed, and they know they are actually the power holders. They know that an opposition is, of course, speaking about freedom and wants more freedom. They don't want the restrictions the powerful are posing on the wider public. And so she says that is a strategy, or that is something that she had seen for a long time, that the right recognizes the authoritarianism accusation only as an external label, and that is, well, of course, just a misconception. The left has a blind spot on, in general, is that they never consider that an accusation they make against other people could actually be false. While most of the protesters may indeed be pro-liberty, and that may be the cause why they do protest, they have just decided that everybody else is authoritarian and they are the freedom fighters, and therefore the accusation against the people is not checked. It's not assumed that there is even the possibility that these people are honest about their ambitions and actually want to lift restrictions. Gatzka goes as far as to delegitimize protests for freedom as such, because her logic is that once a government is democratically elected, you should not resist against it. So, you know who was also democratically elected? Yes, Adolf Hitler. Do you know who else? Actually, most dictators right now. Most dictators are democratically elected. It really is a matter of what you understand under the term democratic, because I would say that Hitler was not possible in a true democracy. I would argue that the Weimar Republic did not espouse democratic values. They had some elections, yes, but so does Iran, so does Russia. That does not mean that the people in itself and the state is carried by a democratic sentiment. And democratically elected does not mean that everything a politician forbids should be accepted as a valid prohibition. I do see that there are some dodgy people among those protesters. That's the case with all protests. I also do see that some of the restrictions are necessary, and I'm not making myself very popular with that right now, because we have such a divide, and I would rather have a sensible discussion policy by policy. Right now, I'm not making a lot of followers and views and so forth by saying that there is a nuance in the debate. The interviewer Christian Bangel adds that the freedom fighter image cannot be true, can be authentic, because authoritarianism were already a part deeply ingrained in right-wing radicalism. And of course, radicalism here means everybody from Donald Trump to Bolsonaro and so forth. So the idea here is that the left uses the Morning Star pinpoint reduction of reality that the left were for equality and therefore against orders in general, and the right were for hierarchy and therefore they would entertain that some person tells another person what to do and not to do. Of course, the reality is rather that left is far happier to come up with ever more prohibitions than the conservative side, who are filled with people who love freedom. But the general idea is, of course, that you can boil down the entire complexity of public debate to the one dimension, and that one dimension is about equality and nothing else. I think the entire book was made for a sentence like the following: in the context of explaining how the early phase of the virus was primarily seen as an external threat coming from China. I mean, this is a discussion about the Wuhan CCP China virus. He says it is a racist, folkish interpretation of the pandemic. They dream of a homogeneous people. To understand this, I have to say that I didn't even bother to translate the word folkish, because there is no dictionary entry for folkish. It does not exist. It's a fighting word usually used to describe the Nazis, but then you can also just say Nazi, so it's a Nazi interpretation or something. It is, I think, the entire populist insult. And here in Germany, it is exclusively used as an insult. Sometimes even conservatives try to throw it back to the left. But there are some insults that are just meant to smear opponents, but does not really clarify what the accusation is actually about. So they would not say Nazi, but they say Völkisch because it cannot be pinpointed to a specific accusation. And so he adds the dream of an homogeneous people. And here you have the entire trope, the entire gaslighting going on. Again, what the hell do they even mean with dream? And also, what are they fearing when they speak or when they fear this homogeneous people? You can argue that, or maybe the skin color is what they have in mind. But then, why would they refer to the Nazis all the time? Because the victims of the Nazis have the same skin color as the Nazis. So is it about that, or is it about some other genetics? Or is it? It isn't really clear. You could also argue that an adherence to Western freedom, pro-freedom values is somehow homogeneous, and that you would hope that the population is homogeneous in the sense that it defends freedom. It is not clear what the left fears, and then it denies that it could be a reality. It's a dream the creepy right has, but it is not specified what exactly they fear. Just recently I heard the stupid sentence that the pandemic could throw back the women's rights movement 30 years. Okay, that was 1990. And sometimes when you listen to feminists, you have this impression that they say, well, the world was separated all the time. And maybe that homogeneous culture is that men walk around freely on the streets while women rattle on the bars on the kitchen window and scream, let me out, but nobody would listen, just how life was in 1990. But the gaslighting is also echoed in the overall blurb of the book that you find on the publishing house website. It says that there is a myth of nations, their heroes and freedom fighters. So there's a myth, a cookie fantasy that nations exist or heroes exist or freedom fighters exist. It's all cookie, except for Martin Luther King maybe, but outside of him, there are no such things as freedom fighters, apparently, at least not if you hold already the power as the left does today. And also it contains this awkward sentence, the völkisch illusion of a clean, homogeneous society should become the political consensus of the future. You know, völkisch. Andreas Audretsch also tries to smear Martin Sellner with this illusion of homogeneity that's at the same time dangerous and totally illusionary. And the generation identity is usually accused of wanting a homogeneous society. Recently, I heard a public broadcast saying that they are rightfully surveyed by the intelligence service Verfassungsschutz, which I think is insane, but they are rightfully surveyed by the Verfassungsschutz, and his explanation why that is okay is because the generation identity believes they wear a European identity and also a German identity. Oh God. I mean, the soccer club next door has an identity. Do you want to arrest me? I mean, no, it's becoming really silly. Just do it. Of course, the people has an identity. All groups have an identity. To pretend that this is an illusion and at the same time it's totally dangerous is insane. And the worst quotes he could find in his entire research for the book coming from Martin Sellner were, not even the bombings during World War II looted our people so badly. The sentence makes no sense grammatically. I also would advise to Mr. Sellner not to refer to the Nazis or the World War if it's not necessary. It's totally confusing. It is not even clear what he tried to say, but the coronavirus was as devastating as the bombing is probably what Mr. Sellner had in mind. And it's not such a terrible sentence, is it? And the second one he brought up was the multicultural population just needed a virus and it starts. He doesn't even bother to explain the context of where he had read it and what this "it" could even mean. You know, the multicultural society needed the virus, to start what? So this is what he came up with in order to smear Mr. Sellner. He even goes as far as to characterize the entire political right, which in this scenario he calls the new right, a phrase only used in German and makes no sense. They just mean everybody anyway. So the new right supposedly would probably also say, according to Mr. Audretsch, the globalist elites have also invented the coronavirus. I also love how he exposes his own loopy mind in this interview, just like his co-author, the historian who makes very vague associations. He is very bad at logic, and the interviewer tries to help him, but fails. So the interviewer adds, okay, maybe there is a contradiction between believing that virus came from China, which is actually the reality, and B, that the virus does not exist. And he explains that Trump speaks of a Wuhan virus, and also he asks people to stand up against restrictions, unnecessary restrictions. Yes, but these things are no contradictions. There are restrictions that are unnecessary, and also the virus does exist. There is no contradiction whatsoever. He even adds some more pseudo contradictions. The historian probably added a more interesting or insightful portion of the book because she looked into epidemics in the past, which is some worthwhile read, I suppose, and she feels reminded of the cholera around the year 1900. The suspected hosts were Russian Jews, and I'm sure she just looked for an epidemic where she could speak about Jews, because the Jewish experience is often parlayed into everything the left tries to talk about. It's not about Jews, and of course dumb people who are fed up with this rhetoric, exploiting the Jewish experience for cheap rhetorical gain. They sometimes blame Jews for that. So it's even kicking up anti-Semitism in a second loop. But anyway, I don't suspect that she does that on purpose, but still she had looked into something that she could relate to Jews, and she does that very extremely. That's not a a mistake. It's not just that in this case the Jews were mentioned, but she makes the parallel with Auschwitz very decidedly. So in around 1900 there was this cholera coming from Russia, and likewise Jewish migrants came from Russia to the West, and they had to entertain border controls. And as she says, the border controls that we know today were kind of established a bit earlier, also in the context of a debate about immigration, namely in 1882 with the Chinese Exclusion Act in the United States. And in around 1900, these Jews had to go through the terrible Nazi-like procedure of having to take a shower, but this time just a real shower, not a gas chamber, just a shower, and also their clothes were disinfected. However, she adds that they were loaded on trains. So after the shower, they were kind of treated like boxes and loaded on trains. The German word verfrachtet really is a reference to how you package something into vehicles, and it's not about personal transport. I believe, I have not looked it up, I didn't look into it in detail, but I believe that these migrants took the train before they had to take these border procedures. I mean, the years before they came to work, they probably also took the same train. I'm also a bit shocked about the fanaticism Ms. Gatzka engages in. She is, of course, making all these parallels with the Third Reich. It's the hysteria could not be worse. She even goes as far as to say that it could have led to the entire ideology of the Third Reich with purging and so forth. So the idea of hygiene itself may have resulted in the Holocaust as if it were a kind of accident. I must tell her that Jews are also quite clean, so it's not something. Cleanliness in itself, dear Ms. Gatzka, isn't a problem, okay? And yet she is so fanatic that she attacks measures against the epidemic and would rather see an epidemic roll over a country than to give up her petty leftist policies like open borders, okay? So she goes to the length of saying people who wanted to restrict immigration always talked about epidemics. Yes, because epidemics are a concern, and it is worthwhile to entertain border controls because of them. And has always been the case. It has always been the case. This is a serious cause. Recently I saw an article about public transport on ZEIT, and they were urging people to take it again. And they even went as far as to say that people use the pandemic as an excuse not to use public transport. So no topic can be petty enough to be prioritized over actual concerns on the political left. And so, of course, they can only talk about the epidemic itself for a limited time. And Mr. Audretsch rather would like to talk about the entire culture war and how the right is trying to gain interpretational high ground, the Deutungshoheit. In a sense, it is about the legitimacy of a homogeneous people. Again, he does not explain that, but he sees that as illegitimate to even debate certain things, and apparently all things leading to one and the same thing, which is at the same time about a hierarchy and also about homogeny, or homogeneity, whatever. Then the interviewer asks, can this even work? And I think the answer it gives away how much the strategists actually believe their own stuff. And he says, I don't expect to wake up in a right-wing autocratic system. The danger is rather that liberal democracy dies slowly and the new right, this is now his fancy word for whatever on the right, gradually takes power through reinterpretation. And of course here he means the reinterpretation of history and current events. This is also found as in the blurb, that they are totally concerned that people make up their own minds about the facts as they are presented in front of them, historic facts as well as the current events. That was it for today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.